Welcome. Hey, Susan. Hey, Travis. Thanks so much for agreeing to be here and sharing a bit about your story as you went through Mad to Glad Parent Coaching. I'd love to say welcome and have you just kick off right away. Tell us a little bit about your family story and why you decided to pursue parent coaching.
Sure, I can jump in first. Looking back, I think it was just a moment where we were really struggling. And the thing I remember when we started the headspace that we were in was just like we both wanted to enjoy parenting again. And we felt like it wasn't something that often felt enjoyable. Like we were just struggling instead of feeling like we're on the same team with our kids, like we were struggling sort of to support them. And we were finding it to be not as enjoyable as we had imagined parenting would be.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of it too is we've gone through a lot of other resources over the years as parents, as books and social media accounts and other people and webinars. Sometimes a book is just like, okay, that's what it is, and I'll go do that. Versus like actually coaching and integrating, and it was a resource that felt new and fresh. I think as an approach.
Yeah, and I love that word integrating. We can learn a really good tool from a book or a specialist or some maybe well-meaning advice, but then when we actually implement it, we might have questions.
We've got 3 kids total. The 2 that we are more focused on supporting through the coaching with you are our son, who's now 13, our daughter, who's 12, and then we have a toddler. So I'm assuming a lot of this we'll have to dig into the recesses of our brains in a few years to circle back with. He's got challenging moments too.
Let's talk about some of the things that you tried in this program. What were some of the tools that really worked for your family?
Right out the gate, I think the specific tools that we found helpful were implementing family meeting, giving clear time that as parents, we were going to be talking to the family about things that we felt like necessary, but also making clear that it wasn't just mom and dad talking at you. It was a conversation. Sometimes before the idea of a structure of a family meeting, it was like, oh, mom and dad are rambling on about something else again or whatever. Feels more open and inclusive. And I think everybody's involved in the conversation. Being clear about family values, family rules, just sort of giving guidance and direction. We continue to feel successful with the idea of the red light, yellow light parenting structure of making sure that boundaries are clear and it's sending clear messages to kids, whether they like the answers or not. It's okay to not like it. Whereas if I walk it back a little bit because I feel bad about what I said or they said, created a lot more confusion and emotional distress and anxiety with the kids.
When I hear you say that, I can already hear some of the strengths and some of the growth areas that we had worked on together. I just want to paint the picture for people who aren't familiar. The red light parenting approach is rooted in brain science. And it's basically like, how can you give your kid an instruction in a way where they'll listen, where you don't feel like you have to bribe them, you don't have to negotiate with them, you don't have to raise your voice and yell at them. And so what it does is it holds up the red light to what we talk about, the little scientist in the brain who's testing, that says, oh, listening is required rather than optional. Now, one of the strengths that I heard you share, Travis, was you said it's okay not to like it. That reminds me of the conversations we had around acknowledging the kids' emotions. You get to have boundaries as long as you also acknowledge kids' emotions. It can't be either or. It can't just be heavy-handed boundaries, over-directing kids all the time. And it also can't be just soft, like, I hear you, you don't like it. What should we do instead? What tends to be your Achilles heel in parenting?
I can go because mine is very clear, at least to me. I overteach with logic. And so I will really focus on wanting them to understand why I'm saying the thing and like, let's all agree. And, like that's just not developmentally appropriate for kids. It's just not where they're at. It like creates the spinning. I think sometimes it feels like it's opening up for negotiation. Like there's some version of the world where I'm trying to get you to agree versus I'm having an authoritative, clear leadership in the house of like, this is what we're doing. I still work on not over teaching with logic and using fewer words. And I think red light parenting, that construct has helped me like lessen the number of words I use and quieting fire in their brain and those sorts of pieces that we talked about. I also think it helps give us language to each other. We're not criticizing each other's parenting, but we're saying, hey, I don't know if we're both red lighting it the same way. Or it seems like you're really saying a lot and you're losing it. Like Travis was very kind and could come back after and say, hey, you're using too many words. You're over teaching with logic. I could see you lost in part way through that. I think the framework of the coaching and the model it helps us individually and it helps us communicate as parents to make sure we're on the same page. So as a unit, we're also doing it more. That's my biggest growth area, is really continue to work on not over teaching with logic, not over explaining, and being more like quiet and listening, being clear, and then like leaving space.
Yeah. And for all, I'll come to you in a minute, Travis, but for all of the parents who are like, yep, that sounds like me. I feel like I'm talking all the time. I'm curious, what is your sense, Susan, of parents who are listening and they feel like they over teach all the time? They're using too many words. Where does that stem from? Why do we do that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I really want to give all of this information to like my kids. And I think there's some part of my brain that says, if I can just get you to agree, no one will be upset about this, right? We need to just agree that this is bad, or we need to agree that we're on the same page about something. And as I say that, I can hear sort of how silly that sounds, right? It's hard to get a 12-year-old to agree that like putting away the tablet is actually good for everybody, right? That's not thing that they're going to agree with. Thinking through why that's happening in me and how to communicate with them better, I'm able to be like more respectful of their opinion. Like Travis was saying, you don't have to like it. And I've gotten better of using some words to say like, man, I don't like putting away stuff that I like doing too. And it really is time to turn it off. If we have trouble turning it off, then this is what's going to happen next, and sort of not negotiating or going like, oh, I know it's tough. 5 more minutes. Okay, that's fine. I get that you're really sad about it. So we'll just keep going. I think the first couple times, right, they test it out, but now I think both of our kids are pretty clear what the expectations are. We're not perfect, but I think we've gotten a lot better at this is the expectation, and then not having to get them to agree with the expectation, to understand that it's not going to change.
I get that because I have more of a harmonious temperament, where I grew up in a family with 7 people, and it was like, okay, I was the kid who, if there was drama going on, I could help make it smoother for multiple parties, which makes sense that I'm a parenting coach to bridge parents and child's communication styles. But I think about harmonizing and getting kids to agree. The other thing that makes us think, if they can agree, then there's not going to be a big emotional outburst. What was that like for you when you, and Travis, you can weigh in on this too, when you started doing the boundaries in a way that was firm yet kind, and the kids did have emotional responses to that?
So quick, and then I'll let Travis go. I think at the time it was really hard, and the emotions would be really big for kind of a long time. And we just had to keep reminding each other, this is like the test, that, and this is them testing and seeing, are we serious, and giving it some time for something new and like a new way to approach it, to for everyone to get used to it. One of the other things that we use a lot, and I just, literally like used it this morning, was a broker will take a break, and trying to explain we're going to take the break to pause, to reset, because whatever's happening isn't working. We don't use it as often as we have in the past because we don't need to anymore. But at the beginning, that broker will take a break. There were big emotions during the break. The breaks were not 30 seconds, right? It didn't go the way we sort of the vision of what they are. But now they take them. They know that we're not going to have an argument about it. They know what the expectations of the breaks are. And so I think that shift of feeling like it was hard at the beginning, and you have to really have the wherewithal to stick with it, and to know that your kid is not mad at you, like it's hard not to take it personal, but understanding like you're an independent person, you're allowed to not like what's happening, but we're going to work through this. And so I think now it feels a lot better than it did when we were starting. It's easy to say like, oh, fine, skip the break this time, or like, whatever, to sort of not to want to relieve them of the feeling of discomfort, or to relieve them of the feeling that they don't like what's happening. But it's gotten a lot better. And I think their emotions have gotten more, I want to say, like, not that they don't have the emotions, but they're able to hold their emotion without the big behavior outburst the way they have before.
Yeah, nice. Travis, is there anything you wanted to comment on that?
I tend to find that from my perspective, there was a lot more of like, I'm the parent, so this is we're doing this now, and you don't like it, but this is what we're doing because I'm the parent, and now you're gonna like it because I said so. But more just like, I have the schedule, I have the understanding of why we're gonna do these things, so this is what we're gonna do now. And like the questions in their head, their reactions to it, all just sort of would spin, and it would make me frustrated that they weren't listening. And so I'm finding that in times when my initial reaction would always be just do what I'm saying, essentially, is just maybe add a few more words of like, here's kind of my thought process here. And actually, what I'm finding is I'm getting some of that back from them. When things are going well, we're all talking and laughing, or everybody's having a good time listening or whatever. It's like, I feel like, oh, some of these things don't need to feel so rigid. There's a level of communication there. If I explain myself just a little bit more to you, I get a little bit more back from them rather than just like an emotional charge of like, you're so mean or you take things away. And there's a bit of a response there that feels like they're involved in it. I'm giving them the respect of like, here's kind of what I'm thinking, and I would love to hear what you have to say back. Sometimes I have to say that word for word, please tell me what you're thinking. Please use your words to help me understand. And then sometimes they just do it naturally. That's something we've worked on too, because I think a big thing we struggled in our household and still struggle with is the tendency to want to interrupt each other rather than just being, oh, can you just wait your turn to talk? It's really very much like, oh, I really want to hear what you have to say. Or you can see I'm in a conversation right now with your sister. If you want to just wait a minute, I'll get back to you. Or is this stuff like, is this an emergency? No. All right. Well, I will get to you in just a second. And then you just turn and say, I'm very interested in what you have to say. Like, I'm not blowing you off. I totally get that what you have is very important to you. So rather than just think, shh, stop talking, like, oh, or whatever, there's this level, even for myself, of we value respect in this family. So you guys need to respect. But that's something I have to remember too. Showing them some respect will also get it back a little bit.
When I'm hearing you say that, I think that the language that you're using, it's a little bit different than what Susan is saying. So Susan's saying, I had to talk less and teach them less, versus in the moment, it sounds like you were pretty direct to Travis and you're like, oh, I actually have to give them a little bit more information so that it doesn't just come off as me bossing them around. And the language that you're saying is, it's important for me to hear what you have to say. Yes, it's the value of respect. And it's also conveying this message to children, like, you matter. When there's challenging behaviors, when there's impulsivity, when there's externalized aggression, poor listening, some of these common behaviors in general for families, when that happens, having the perspective of, oh, that's right, we can prioritize kids' psychological needs of knowing that they matter, especially when things are hard, that can go a long way. Were there other things that come to mind that you both do now that you either didn't know or you just do more of that help your kids feel that bond and that they matter?
For me, it's prioritizing the happy chemicals stuff and wanting really make an effort to make that a priority and focus on the relationship and think about when things I'm doing are detracting from like us feeling more bonded and having a more positive relationship. You're asking like sort of how does it feel different? One other thing I'm thinking of too is in those moments I'm prioritizing relationship. And as Travis was talking, we were all doing this like, well, now I'm mad, now I'm mad, now I'm mad. And really like being able to have some tools to stay calm in the moments where they're not. That I'm like, okay, if I mirror this and we keep doing this, everybody's just going to end up yelling. I'm going like, okay, I need to be the adult. I need to be the one who steps this back down a little bit. And I think the tools to help us not do that lets us convey you matter. You're important to me. I'm here. We're having this conversation. I'm doing it because I love you and because this is important. I'm not trying to like battle through this with you. I'm going to help you through whatever is happening, whatever you're feeling, but I'm going to be that like calming presence versus needing to keep escalating with each other.
Why do we do this work as parents? Why do we grow? Why do we do parent coaching? Why do we learn new tools when we've got a lot of things going on at our job and we want to come home and we want to take care of ourselves as well? What's your vision for your family? Why has parent coaching been important for each of you?
For me, it's been important because they get to be kids once. And so things that we can do as parents to make sure that their childhood is at least the way that they would want it, or at least they're spending time making memories and making friends and doing the fun things that we remember and enjoy doing, rather than just feeling like they're constantly in a state of being stuck or being upset or dysregulated. We feel like we're grasping at straws for so many other different techniques, versus the coaching became more of how to integrate what brain science knows about children growing up and how we can weave that into who we are as individuals. And then parents, we don't have to be right on everything, but they're turning a page towards teenagers and like you get just kids one time in life, making sure that their opportunities are there, and that maybe that some of the stuff that's really hard is something that we continue to take on as parents and help them through so that they can spend the rest of their time doing things that kids should be doing.
Earlier, you said something like, oh, why do we have to do these structures and why does it have to be so rigid? And I want to bring that back in light of what you just said about giving the kids the childhood that they deserve and having those happy memories that we talked about you have from your upbringing, like that carefree and that positivity and feeling good. What did you learn? Why are these structures necessary given the personality types of your children? What did you learn and understand about how your kids are different than you that made this whole growth process necessary?
What comes to mind is sort of the idea that falling back on the structure of what we've put in place through coaching gives everybody a sense of not calm, but a sense of support, a feeling, confidence, a level of if we're veering away a little bit from our structures because things are going well. If something doesn't seem to be going well, we can fall back on our structures that we do know that work. Growing up, there can be a lot of chaos and unknowing and lack of trust. And when things change, that gets scary for kids. A structure, a foundation for how we operate at home and how we value emotions and everything at home makes it feel better. That's a comfort space for them that we're trying to create because sometimes it's just a little too emotional and chaotic. It just needs to not be sometimes for them.
Yeah, I like that safe space. In our Magic Lad hosted book club right now, we're reading a book called Hold On to Your Kids, which is this concept of having home and the parent-child relationship being the safe space to keep coming back to. And with kids who are more emotionally intense, they ask for a different approach in order to feel really seen and heard. In my specialty area, with Magic Lad, it is having some structure so there's predictability and can calm some of those anxieties or past traumas. Susan, how about you? What would you like to share?
I appreciate Travis's points, and I fully agree of like doing it for what our kids needed. I also think there is really like we matter too. And I think in talking with you of like one of our first meetings, you're like, well, I don't even meet your kids. I'm not going to talk to them at all. And I was like, oh, so many of the things we do, and maybe people who can relate to like, well, it's therapists and it's these people and skills and da da da. And like all, it's teachers and IEPs and all these people who are like, yes, you're communicating about your kid, with your kid, through your kid, all of those things, but just having space to say, how do I show up as a parent in a way that is good for me and that'll be good for my kids too. I don't think we had a resource that was really focused on how can I calm, what structures do we as parents need to put in place so that we feel good about what we're doing. I think that was just part of what was really helpful. A lot of what I draw in is how do I want to show up in a way that is sustainable for me? Like Travis saying, grasping at straws, this constant, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. It doesn't feel good to feel like you can't figure out with your kid. And it doesn't feel good to feel like you can't figure out why this isn't what you want it to be either. So I think a lot of that focus on just how are we showing up parenting team and how am I showing up as an individual, it was really helpful. I don't mean to be like, it's not about my kid. Like, yes, for all the reasons for our kids, but I also think, yes, like for the reasons that everybody does better if we all function well as a family. And I think that was sort of a missing piece and what was in our tool belt. So
I appreciate that. And I know it's humbling to share like, hey, here's an area where I'm being vulnerable and an area that I chose to grow in. Thank you for sharing your story, your parenting experience and coaching here. If there's somebody on the fence right now who's like, I feel like we might need some growth in our home, what kind of advice would you say to those parents?
Yes.
I would say, do it.
Yeah, that's to say, if you're feeling like it, you're probably past the point of where it will definitely help. So yeah, I would say yes. Listen to that urge and track down resources like this.
I was going to say same thing. If you're feeling like, well, maybe your things aren't working, you're probably on to more than you realize. And if you have a kid who's, I liked your words, like really emotionally intense, or kids who have big feeling, right? All the words that people use to describe kids that are just sometimes hard to feel like you're parenting them in a way that you all feel good, or hard to feel like they're really struggling. And it's just like, it sucks to see your kid struggle. It's hard at the end of the day to feel like you didn't show up for your kid the way you wanted to. That's what you're feeling. Or you end the day going like, well, dang it, that wasn't great. It's different than a lot of the other resources. A parent coach, like for you and as a parent, is much different than like, there are a lot of things for kids. There's a lot of services, there's a lot of supports, there's a lot of things for kids who have big feelings, kids who are emotionally intense, but there's not a lot for parents of kids, like specifically. And so if that's something you feel like you're missing, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you both so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. And for parents who are listening to this and they want an easy way to have a conversation, I host a free monthly gathering online. It's just called The Gathering for parents of emotionally intense kids who want to talk about what behaviors they're seeing, how they're responding as a parent, practice looking beneath the behaviors to see if there are ways of making it better. And we get to just chat and meet and greet. So that's once a month. If anybody wants to join that, it's free. You can go to SamanthaMo.com. Or if you just wanted to set up a one-on-one call with me, same thing. I have a free 30-minute consultation. Email us hello@SamanthaMo. Thank you so much, Travis and Susan, for sharing your story. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.